Emily and I are here with our 5 favorite deduction games. These are not our top 5. We're not counting down because we couldn't agree on everything.
Although there is one that's obviously better than all the others.
Yeah.
You'll just have to deduce which one it is.
It's not the last one we're going to talk about.
It might be the last one.
It might be the last one we're talking about. I'm going to err on the side of letting Emily just carry this because she is the deduction fan at MVM.
I am.
But one thing to get out of the way, or a couple things, we ruled out social deduction. This is not about social deduction.
Nope.
This is logic puzzle style deduction. Yep. We don't even include word games like code names and things like that because a lot of those take into account like knowing the people at the table or how they might think. This is truly logic deduction games.
Strict information,
Yep.
so not even things like fiction either, where there's
Right.
like some lying. It's
Yeah.
just strict information, logic puzzles, that kind of deduction, pure form. We love it.
And speaking of pure form, we're going to start with an oldie but a goodie. It's probably the classic deduction game, Mastermind.
Dun dun dun.
Mastermind is a game I think both of us grew up with.
Yeah.
I remember playing it way back when. And it's an interesting game where one player, and I use the term player loosely, builds a code of what, 5? 4? Mm-hmm. 4 different colored pegs. I think there's an advanced version that has more.
My old edition only had 4. I can tell you that for sure.
Mine probably too. They create a code behind a little screen of these little pegs. The other player just spends the rest of the game trying to determine what those are by putting some colored pegs in their little first guess, and then the other player reports back some loose information about how many are right, how many are wrong, kind of Wordle style.
Yep.
Until the player either gets it or runs out of guesses.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, this is a classic. It wasn't until today for me, though, when we were talking about this, that I realized, you know what? That other player who makes the code, they're not really playing the game too much. They're really just there to be the computer reporting back to the actual player of the game.
Yes, we coded Mastermind in one of my earliest computer science classes.
Okay.
Yeah, because you can. Because the person who's making the code, it's a very like logical system of like, well, it's either yes, no for all of these and how it's going to go.
There's no thinking to
There's
it.
no thinking.
Yeah.
It's the only thing you think about is your first, what is my code going to be? And after that, it's all let the chips fall like they may.
Now, that isn't to say there isn't tension there because that player still gets to sit there and take pleasure, even if it's an illusion, into how good they crafted the code. Because I do remember being that player as a kid thinking, oh, I'm going to do all 3 one color and then 1 a different color.
And they'll never guess.
They'll never get it. You can't do that all the time. I'll just put it that way. They'll catch on to your game. But yeah, Mastermind is a classic deduction game. I will say it's not something I've played for a very long time. I did buy a more modern version of it when my boys were younger because I did want to play with them. Because it's just it's a simple game. And it's very relatable. I mean, that's why Wordle exists. Wordle is basically Mastermind with a word.
With words, yeah.
So yeah, Mastermind is the first one. The next one we want to talk about is probably, I would say, considered the modern classic for deduction games, and that is Search for Planet X or Search for Lost Species, which is the newer one. You have more experience with this one.
The definite question for this one is which one's better or which one should we play? But we just put them both on here.
Yes.
Because I think they are both good experiences, both good deduction games, and they are very similar in how they play. So in both of the games, what you're trying to do is you're trying to either find the lost species, which is an animal, or the Planet X, which is a planet where you don't know where it's at in our solar system. But you're going to be doing it through deduction. And so each of the different things that are either in the solar system or on the island have different rules for how they can compare to each other or how you can find them. So for example, in Planet X, you have the asteroids, which have to be within a space of each other or within a certain amount of each other. And there's only, I think, 2 of them, maybe 3 of them.
Yeah.
So you can kind of start to deduce, like once you know where one is, okay, this is where the other one might be, this is where the other one might be. But you're trying to figure out, in the end, where is the actual Planet X? But also, in both of the games, you have to figure out not just where the lost thing is, but also what the things are around it.
Yeah.
So it's not like, okay, I can get lucky and say I have this one piece of information. You have to actually know quite a bit more about it. And I will also say that with these deduction games, there's more to it about how the player interaction goes. So throughout the game, there are going to be times where you can kind of guess, oh, I think I have this information. And I'm going to put information on the board that at first is face down, but later on will be revealed. And once it gets revealed, if I was right, it'll stay out there and everyone will now know this, but I will get points. So it's interesting because it's not just like a solve the puzzle
Sure.
you win. You could solve the puzzle and still not win if you actually didn't get as many points as the people around you who are finding out more along the way.
Yeah, these games have intricate systems in place because, like Emily said, it's not just trying to figure out one thing. It's trying to figure out a few different things.
Yep.
And there's a fair amount of moving parts. I wouldn't say those games are fiddly, but they are for true deduction fans.
Yep.
I think these search games are not exactly the game that you put on the table for people new to deduction games.
But I will say that one of the things that they took into mind too was that you can start with a different number of hints or difficulty. So both of them have two different sides for different difficulty levels. And also, like, I can play it with no hints and just go in blind, and David could play it with 10 hints and get a bunch of information.
And
so
still lose.
But you're more likely to end at a similar time, if depending on the different skill levels that you have for the game, or how often you have played this game on repeat, on repeat, on repeat.
Like her. And I say I lose kind of jokingly. It's not that I don't like deduction games. It's just that when you play with someone like Emily, you get used to losing, for sure.
But it's really nice to be able to change that too, to be able to say, like, I can play with somebody who doesn't play almost ever deduction games, and we can still play this game and be very competitive with each other, which is really nice.
Yeah. Now, on the flip side of that, something that's less intricate, maybe borderline elegant, dare I say, is Cryptid. This game is, I think you might agree, maybe the most elegant of deduction games. It's very simple at what you're doing. This does, like many deduction games, come with that warning of player error.
Yes.
You can play this game and you're relying on not a piece in the middle of the table to give you information, but the other players at the table are giving you information about what they know. And if someone reports incorrectly,
everything's wrong.
It can derail the entire game. Now, if you're watching this video, you probably know that kind of comes with
the
territory with a deduction game. Not all.
Not all. Some can be played solo.
Yeah, 100%.
And some are played with like the search for ones are played with an app too. So that helps a little bit. Cryptid, you do have to rely on the other players doing it correctly.
Yes, and it can get a little more complicated in your head. They have advanced questions that you can ask that kind of add some double negatives to the equation.
Yeah.
And it becomes not harder in terms of if you get the information back and you get it accurately, you should be fine.
Yeah.
But it's answering those questions where someone says, am I not
within
this spaces of this? And then you as the person answering have to go, yes, it's not. And
but you're not saying that part out loud. You're just saying yes. And your head saying, it's not within 3 spaces.
Correct. It is a very, those advanced rules really start to melt my brain a little bit. And it takes Cryptid from a game that it's one of my top 10 games.
Yeah.
But I never play it with those advanced rules because of that. Most people at the table, including myself, are just like, and because there's that human error factor, just any amount of things that make that more likely to happen, I don't inject that into the game because if someone makes a mistake, some people at the table will go, well, we just waste, what a waste of time. Not me, because it is a pretty fast game.
And what I'll say too about the elegance of it is that there's one solution, right? And so that is really fun to see how it comes together, because there are times when I'm playing when I'm like, I think your clue's this, I think your clue's this, and I think that my clue's that, but wait, then there's 2 possible answers. I am not right then, because I have to get to a place where there's only one possible answer.
And it is one of the most joyous events in gaming when you can answer correctly, and not only that, but then you can say, and this is your clue, this is your clue, this is your clue, I knew it all. And as I've said this before on the channel, it's one of those moments where if you're that person, you'll never feel smarter than doing that in a game of Cryptid, and at the same time, you'll also never feel more stupid if you're on the receiving end of that. And I've been in both situations. I've had games where I'm like, oh, I nailed it. And there's people at the table like, huh? How? And then I've been the guy going, what? It's probably been when I played with Emily.
But I will also say, too, on this one, so it's not a score thing. It's just the first person to do it. So it plays up to 5. And sometimes you're like, you ask your thing, you're like, oh, now I know what it is. But I have to wait for 4 more people to take their turns and not figure it out until it's my turn. So it can be very tense around the table of like, why are you giving too much information? Don't give them that. Don't tell them that.
Right. The next one we want to talk about is kind of an interesting, although you're just relying on one person at the table.
Yep.
And it is kind of it's a fun, fast-paced one.
Even faster.
Yeah, incredibly fast, and also very spatial. It's called Break the Cube. The makers of this game actually made Break the Code originally, which is pretty good too. It's a deduction game. It's, in my opinion, not as good as Break the Cube.
I really think Break the Cube is an elegant little game. So what it is it's just little pieces, like, they're not polyomino because they're 3D,
Yeah, they're
right?
3-dimensional polyominoes, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, so you could, at most, you'd be coming up with like a 3x3 cube, like a Rubik's Cube, but there's not that many pieces. And you are creating a little structure, right? And then I am trying to guess what the person to my left's little structure was.
Yeah.
And they're trying to guess the person to their left's little structure, and they're trying to guess my structure. And so we're kind of going in a circle trying to figure out what is the little structure you created. And the way we're doing it is by we're asking, if I'm standing at this angle looking across, what do I see? Or what can I see from here? What can I see from there? What can I see from there? So it's all this really cool spatial stuff going on.
Incredibly spatial.
But it's also really quick. It's quicker than Cryptid. It's probably the quickest game we have on this list. And so even it also relies on making sure that the other players know what they're saying. And
It's not as bad in that respect, though. I don't think you can screw it up.
Because there's not as much information, honestly.
Yeah.
It's not like there's a huge board where you're trying to figure out, oh, could it go there, could it go... It's like, it's this tiny little thing that, like, can you do it or not? But it's also like, it goes very fast, and it's very cool to try to get that race element of like, I think I'm close to yours, but I also think they're close to mine. Should I just guess and take a stab at it?
Yeah, it is highly interactive. I'd say the one warning I'd give is because you're just dealing with trying to figure out the player to your left, this could be one of those games where one player's really good, one player's not, or someone built a structure that's like maybe not as complicated or more simplistic.
But that's the thing, right? Isn't that like the illusion of like, ooh, mine is the most complicated structure, but it's like, it's within bounds. So it's really just like, you know, anything could be the solution.
Plus, it's really fun because the whole time, people are like getting down next to the table and like checking out their thing and then reporting back to the player with their question about what things look like and what they can see from these different angles, which is really cool.
It almost feels like a dexterity game, but it's not at all.
It's not.
But it just feels like it because you get to like actually build something, and then the way you're looking around it and trying to like think outside the box and like be like, oh, I think I finally got it. It should go this way.
Yeah. Now, on the flip side of, you might say it's elegant, but on the flip side of quick, simple, exciting, fun, tactile, we've got the last one we want to talk about. And
the best one, Turing Machine.
She did it. She stole it. Yeah, Turing Machine is, I have to admit, probably the end-all, be-all
deduction games. It is. It's great. So in Turing Machine, you're actually code breaking. You're trying to break the code on what this has to be based on a number of clues. And the clues can be anything like it has this many even numbers, has this many odd numbers, has this many colors. But it gets really wild and crazy with what some of these clues can be. And not only do the clues vary by a ton, but it also, the number of clues, the way the clues go together, the different modes you can play on. We have a whole video about it, and I could talk.
We do have a whole,
and
you could. She could talk longer right now, but she loves this game. It's a deduction game for me. No, I will say, I admire all of these games, quite frankly. All of the games we play in this category generally work really well at what they do as a deduction game. Some of them are going to, like many games, are going to hit with some people and not hit with others. Turing Machine, for me, is true deduction. For me, not as fun of a game. There's not as much excitement and fun going on. There doesn't feel like there's as much interaction as, say, something with Cryptid, where literally every turn you're like asking another player at the table a question. And there's people at the table who are sitting there like, well, no one's asked me a question. Then all of a sudden someone asks them a question. It doesn't have that sort of thing, but boy, does it have the deduction.
Oh, it's very, very crunchy. And it has extra modes that you can play that are like Nightmare, and you don't even know which clues go to which thing, and you're just using so many different notes on that pad to try to get it and try to still beat the machine.
But those are our 5 favorite noteworthy deductions. Some might say best deduction games.
Deduction games.
There are more deduction games on the way. We've just received a handful. We got Archaeologic, which we just played.
One of the same designers as Turing Machine.
One of the co-designers from Turing Machine. It's probably, well, not probably, a more accessible game, but definitely check out our just played content on that. We got another one called Finding Atlantis, which we haven't played at all.
But we're going to.
But we're going to, because we can't not play the deduction games for sure. And then finally, the last one is Almost Innocent. This one kind of flew under my radar.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about it. Then we happened to be sent a copy, and I just happened to play it just this last week. This one was very satisfying. It's from the same people who did Hidden Leaders. Totally different game, but it genuinely feels very Sudoku-like, and it's cooperative. Everyone has information about sort of a crime that takes place. So kind of think Clue, but it doesn't play like Clue. And then there's this board that kind of resembles a Sudoku board with different visual information. And as you're gathering information, you're asking the person to your right, because the person on your right, the information they have to start with, sort of effectively their clues and things they can rule out for themselves, is your information.
That you have to find out.
So I think that's a really interesting hook. Not to mention there are scenarios in this thing that change it up and really make it challenging. Like all of a sudden there's a queen on the board and she moves around and makes it more costly to ask certain types of questions and things like that. So a really cool one, and I think there's even more on the horizon. I think when Turing Machine hit, it kind of got everyone going on deduction. Not to mention things like Wordle. I mean, deduction, Sudoku. Deduction is just a very, very fun thing. I'm actually a little surprised that there haven't been more deduction games through the years, and we've seen so many just in the last couple.
Tell us in the comments below, which ones have we missed? Which ones are your favorites? Because I'm always looking for another deduction game to play.
Don't tell her.
Tell me.
Don't tell her about any more deduction games. Until next time, though, make sure everyone has fun at the table, whether you're deducing things or not. And we'll see you then.